everyone. It is Sabra from Hoof Falls and Footfalls, and I wanted to go live to do a video about Ask an Adaptive or Therapeutic Horseback Riding Instructor. And my computer's giving me an odd notification. There we go. So I want to do a video of Ask an Adaptive Horseback Riding Instructor. Usually I do these pre-recorded, but I had some extra time today, so I'm going to go ahead and do it live. Let me know, either if you're watching on a replay or if you're joining in live, if you have any questions about this topic, and I'd be happy to answer them. But for this video, I'm going to be addressing the question of how many students should you have in an adaptive or therapeutic horseback riding lesson? Can you have too many? Can you have too few? This question has been asked through email, through Facebook posts, through one-on-one discussion with instructors, and so I wanted to go ahead and talk about it. This is a question that I'll give my feedback and my opinion and personal experiences, but there's going to be a lot of factors that kind of go into what works best for you and what works best for the program or the barn that you are working at. Are there too many students in a lesson? Yes, absolutely. You can definitely have too many students in an adaptive lesson. I have personally found that when you have students that need support, so that means like a horse leader and 1 to 2 sidewalkers with them, your maximum is usually 3 to 4 students in a class, and that is for quality and safety reasons. I think 3 is kind of the sweet spot as far as the maximum goes. When it's a more involved class, so that means that you have students that have 2 to 3 volunteers, then I tend to stick more around 2, maybe 3 in a group. But above that, 4 or 5 even, that's a lot. Anything above that, it's more kind of just getting them on riding around and getting off and just trying to manage the pieces and doing what we would call being a traffic cop, which is really not instructing. You're just out there making sure nothing crashes and burns and we don't have any accidents. So as far as too many in a class, I would say above 4, you're getting into safety issues and management issues and being able to realistically teach a skill to those students. You're only human as an instructor, and so being able to manage, let's say, 5 students out in the arena, plus the 5 horses that they're on, plus the 5 horse leaders that could be with them, plus maybe another 5 sidewalkers, maybe maximum 10 sidewalkers if they each have 2. That's a lot of moving pieces. So that's why in a class that might have more involvement, so they need more support, 3 is kind of that sweet spot for if we have to make it work. When you're getting into the larger classes as well, you need to think about other components, which is your horse usage. So what horses you have available, do they appropriately fit the students that you need? Weight limits, tack, and equipment is another one. What about volunteers? What volunteers do you have available to support you and your students at that time? So when you're looking at the number of students going on and what works best, look at the safety factor, look at the tack and the equipment factor, the horses, the volunteers, all of those pieces. I have had about 10, no, more than that now. 10 is my go-to number. More than 10 years experience teaching adaptive or therapeutic horseback riding lessons, and a bulk of the time I spent teaching larger group lessons, so 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 if we were doing like a summer program, specialty program. And I have found that personally I like private to semi-private lessons. That's where I feel like I can have the best quality of lesson when I'm working with my students, and I can make the most progress. I can definitely manage classes of 3, 4 students, but making progress and getting quality practice time and feedback to the students gets challenging because, again, of those pieces that you're managing. I personally really like those private lessons, but the downside of that is that then you don't necessarily have the peer interaction and you maybe can't practice arena etiquette I mean, you could get creative and you could be the other horse or the other person in the arena for your students to practice. But sometimes in those private lessons, I do miss my students having that peer interaction or learning how to ride with another student or being able to, play a game with someone that is reinforcing the skill that we're working on for that day. The semi-privates are great because you have the peer interaction for the students that are more involved, so might need more support or more processing time, or we might be taking things a little bit more slower and our progress is much smaller wins. So say we're not, making big jumps in progress of learning how to do walk to trot transitions one week, and then the next week we're doing walk to trot and maybe working towards a little bit more independence. We're looking at like micro wins or micro progressions. And with students like that, where it's more reinforcing the same skill over and over, like the reining and the woes and walk-ons and posture and alignment, and those can get a little, they get hard to keep fresh, I guess, over time as an instructor. It's nice to have two students in a class because then you can have games going on that help reinforce and practice that skill that you might be practicing for the 50th time during that lesson or during the ride of that student. So semi-privates are great. I personally, when I'm progressing a student to riding independently at the walk or at the trot, I personally like private lessons first, and then we can move into a semi-private. In other programs where maybe you don't have the availability due to budget or timing or whatever it might be, and you have to do group lessons, if you're having students where they're needing to progress towards more independence, that 2 to 3 in a lesson is good. 4 is getting a little challenging because, again, that's getting harder to manage when you're having a bunch of new students, not new students, but newer independent students, I guess you could say, and keeping things safe and making sure that you are appropriately communicating to your volunteers, giving them support, giving your students support, and keeping all of that safe. So I've had it where students are in a group lesson up into a certain point, group lesson being 3 to 4 students in a class, and then we're at that next point where, okay, we can stay in a group lesson and make pretty slow progress, or we can take a break and do private or semi-private lessons and really work on that next skill level of maybe going from supported at the trot to independent at the trot, where in order to get enough ride time and quality practice and repetition and safe repetition, we need to go more private to semi-private, and it's hard to accomplish in a group lesson, especially when we're looking at doing more of an adaptive or therapeutic riding lesson when we have not just a student and a horse, but other factors such as physical ability, cognitive ability, volunteer support, all those pieces. So there's lots to think about. I'm going to take a look here at the comments. If it's there. Oh, it's hiding. Oh no, I see it. They changed the they changed all the settings here on the live, so I can't see comments, but I'll check them afterwards. So I guess kind of long roundabout answer of how many students should you have in a lesson, and can you have too many, can you have too few? It's going to depend on what you want. I would say if a program is pushing to add more students to a lesson, so say you normally have 2 to 3 in a group, and they're pushing for you to add 4, 5, 6, or more due to monetary reasons, I would have a very, upfront and open discussion of quality of the lesson versus quantity of income and quantity of people that you are serving. Do you want the quality and the progress to kind of be forefront, and then you might have to make that up on the funding side of either finding more grants and donors or changing the lesson prices if you go from a larger lesson of 4 to 5 students down to a smaller lesson of 2 to 3, and you have to offset the revenue that's being brought in there. Or do you just want numbers? What are you after? So when you're looking at how many you're having in a lesson, that the monetary piece is something that often gets factored in, and sometimes higher ups are pushing for a larger number of lessons, but then they forget, or maybe they're not aware of the factors that the instructor has to manage during those lessons, and all the safety pieces and all that comes along. Because, hey, what's one more kid in the class, right? Or what's one more student, and tossing them out there. They have volunteers to help, right? So those are things that when someone is pushing for a larger class, you've got to analyze the whole big picture, reevaluate what are the goals. Maybe you have the ability to do a couple larger group lessons, maybe 4. I would highly recommend not really going above 4 if you can, just for safety reasons and being able to monitor. And maybe those are students where it's more recreational based. Again, it's that repetition of the basic skills, the whoa, the walk on, the posture. We're doing a lot of incorporating games and activities. But then for those students who are really looking to progress in their equestrian skills to the best of their physical and cognitive ability, we need to have lessons set aside where it's 2, 3, maybe 4 people in a class, because of the realistic ability to manage a lesson and make progress with our students, and also be able to have horses and tack and equipment and volunteers available. So lots of different things to think about when you are talking about and considering the number of students that you should have in your class. But remember, I guess bottom line is that you are human, and even though you are might be a very good therapeutic riding instructor, very experienced, you only have so much attention to spread out over your lessons. So if you have 4 students in a lesson, it's not just the 4 students, but you have the 4 horses, and then any other volunteers that you might have, and then are they walking, are they trotting? So just remember to not expect too much from yourself, and that there is a cap to what you can physically and cognitively manage and keep tabs on, even if you have volunteers out there supporting you. So just keep that in mind when you're considering, number and all of that. So number, you're human. What can your attention handle, and your what can your observation handle? What volunteers do you have? What horses do you have available? Safety, quality versus quantity, lots of discussion points. So a little bit rambling on this topic, but there really wasn't a straightforward answer. So I hope this was helpful. If you're watching on live or on a replay, feel free to drop a comment. Let me know what you have found to be kind of that sweet spot for you as the instructor. What do you like number-wise in your lessons? Do you have a preference for, private versus semi-private versus group? What's your maximum group? Have you taught a large group, and what was your experience? So large being 4 or more. When do you distinguish between group or private, semi-private lessons? And what type of students do you serve? So love to hear from you guys, and thanks for those who joined in live, and I'll see you guys on the next video.